The guests froze when the jet door opened. Out stepped the ex-wife Frank, invited to humiliate, glowing in emerald silk, holding 3 little boys in tuxedos, and walking like she owned the sky. Cameras flashed, whispers exploded, and in that moment, his wedding turned into his reckoning. But what she said when their eyes met made the whole crowd gasp. Frank Larry wanted to disgrace his ex-wife by inviting her to his high-profile wedding. He imagined her shuffling in with worn shoes and a bowed head, a living testament to his upgrade. But when Amber Robinson descended from a sleek private jet in an emerald gown, 3 handsome boys in tuxedos clutching her hands, the red carpet became a runway of reckoning. The woman he'd called too plain for success had arrived like royalty, and the wedding was about to become a funeral for his pride. But this story didn't begin on a red carpet. It began years earlier, in the oil-stained corners of ambition and desperation. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. And please rate this story from 1 to 10. Now, back to the story. Back then, in the small Georgia town of Greenville, Frank Larry lived. He was in his late 20s then, an auto mechanic with calloused hands and dreams too big for his paycheck. Everyone who knew him described Frank as driven, the kind of man who worked double shifts at Johnson's Auto Repair without complaint, who sketched business plans on Waffle House napkins during lunch breaks, who spoke about owning a trucking empire the way other men spoke about college football. Frank wore the same 3 Dickies work shirts in rotation, drove a beat-up '98 Civic with duct tape holding the bumper together, and walked with his shoulders slightly hunched as if carrying the weight of overdue bills. He was hungry for the American dream, restless with potential, and burning with the kind of ambition that could either build empires or destroy souls. But behind the grease-stained uniforms, behind the craftsman toolbox and the studio apartment off Highway 85, there was someone who believed in Frank when believing required sacrifice. Her name was Amber Robinson. Amber was a quiet, gentle woman in her mid-20s who worked at Sweet Grace Bakery downtown. She had warm brown skin that glowed even under the harsh bakery lights, soft eyes that carried kindness like Sunday morning church bells, and hands that could turn flour and faith into something beautiful. She wasn't loud or flashy. She didn't wear designer labels or drive a fancy car. But Amber had something rare, a heart that loved without conditions and a spirit that refused to quit. She had met Frank at Johnson's Auto Repair, her old Toyota Corolla finally giving up the ghost on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon. He'd fixed it for free, refusing payment from someone whose smile could light up the whole state of Georgia. That smile became his daily bread. Within months, they were inseparable. For 5 years, Amber stood beside Frank through the kind of poverty that tests love's foundation. She sold homemade peach cobblers and sweet potato pies at the farmer's market to help pay his LLC registration fees. She worked overtime shifts so he could afford the networking breakfast at the Chamber of Commerce. She prayed over him when doubt crept into their cramped bedroom at 3 a.m., whispering, "Your time is coming, baby. I can feel it in my bones." And then, finally, the breakthrough came. Frank's logistics company, Larry Express Transport, secured a major contract with a regional Amazon distribution center. Money began flowing, first a trickle, then a stream, then a flood. Within 18 months, Frank Larry transformed from a struggling mechanic into a successful black entrepreneur. New office in Buckhead, fleet of 18-wheelers, tailored suits from Lenox Square, invitations to galas and entrepreneur conferences. But something else changed too, something darker. Success didn't humble Frank. It inflated him like a hot air balloon cut loose from its tether. The man who once said grace over dollar menu burgers now complained when dinner wasn't Ruth's Chris quality. The man who'd held Amber's hand through food stamps now avoided being photographed with her at networking events. He started coming home late, smelling of expensive cologne and someone else's perfume. He began looking at Amber differently, not with love, but with something closer to shame. The respect he once had for her sacrifices evaporated like sweet tea left in the Georgia sun. In his mind, Amber represented everything he wanted to forget. The struggle, the WIC appointments, the years of being invisible. And instead of gratitude for the woman who'd made his rise possible, Frank felt only embarrassment for the reminder she represented. Their conversations grew shorter. His kisses became mechanical. The warmth that once filled their apartment was replaced by a cold distance that no amount of luxury furniture from Restoration Hardware could hide. Amber felt it all, the shift, the withdrawal, the slow death of their love. She tried everything. She bought new outfits from Macy's with money she didn't have. She watched YouTube tutorials on how to be a boss wife. She smiled wider, laughed louder, tried desperately to fit into the world Frank was building without consulting her. But nothing worked. Because Frank had already made his decision. He'd already chosen status over substance, image over integrity. And on one terrible evening in their new Alpharetta home, he would finally say out loud what his actions had been screaming for months. The storm was coming. And Amber Robinson, the woman who had loved a broke man into greatness, was about to be discarded like an old work shirt that no longer fit his new life. The divorce papers came on a Friday afternoon, delivered by a courier in a crisp white shirt, who had no idea he was handing over the death certificate of a 5-year marriage. Amber signed them with trembling hands, sitting alone in the apartment she could no longer afford. The Alpharetta townhouse Frank had already moved out of 2 weeks prior. He'd taken everything, the furniture, the flat-screen TV, even the coffee maker she'd bought with her bakery tips 3 years ago. All that remained were her clothes, a few kitchen items, and the crushing weight of rejection. She stared at her signature, Amber Robinson, and realized she'd never even taken his last name. Maybe God had known all along. That weekend, Amber packed her life into 2 suitcases and a garbage bag. She called her cousin Janelle in Atlanta, her voice breaking with every word. "He's really done with me, Nell. After everything, I'm not enough." Janelle didn't hesitate. "Get on the next Greyhound. You hear me? Pack your stuff and come home. You're going to be all right, Amber. I promise you that." But Amber didn't feel all right. She felt hollowed out, like someone had reached inside her chest and removed everything vital. That Sunday morning, instead of going to church like she always did, she sat on the empty living room floor and cried until no more tears would come. "God," she whispered into the silence, "if you're real, if you see me, I need you now, because I got nothing left." By Monday evening, Amber was in Atlanta, sleeping on Janelle's pull-out couch in a cramped East Point apartment. The city was loud, chaotic, nothing like quiet Greenville. Car horns replaced crickets. Sirens replaced silence. And every morning, Amber woke up to the reality that she was starting over at 30 years old with $247 in her checking account. Janelle worked as a nursing assistant at Grady Hospital, pulling 12-hour shifts that left her exhausted but determined. "You can stay as long as you need," she told Amber, even though they both knew the apartment barely fit one person, let alone 2. For the first 2 weeks, Amber barely left the couch. She scrolled through Facebook, torturing herself with photos of Frank at business luncheons, Frank shaking hands with city council members, Frank living his best life like she'd never existed. Depression wrapped around her like a heavy blanket she couldn't kick off. But Janelle wouldn't let her sink. "Get up," she said one Wednesday morning, pulling the covers off. "You can cry at night, but during the day, you hustle. That's how we survive in this family." So Amber started looking for work. She applied to bakeries, restaurants, grocery stores, anywhere that would take someone with minimal experience and a bruised spirit. Most places never called back. The ones that did offered minimum wage and irregular hours. Finally, she got hired doing catering prep work for a small company called Tasteful Events. The pay was $11 an hour. The hours were brutal, early mornings and late nights depending on events. But it was something, and something was better than the nothing Frank said she was. Amber threw herself into the work. She chopped vegetables until her fingers cramped. She assembled appetizer trays with precision that made the head chef nod in approval. She showed up early and stayed late, not because she loved the job, but because staying busy kept her from falling apart. The nights were harder. Alone on Janelle's couch, Amber would pull out her phone and stare at Frank's number, her thumb hovering over the call button. She wanted to beg him to reconsider. She wanted to ask what she'd done wrong. She wanted to scream at him for throwing away something sacred, but she never called. Instead, she opened her Bible, the one her grandmother had given her years ago, pages worn soft from use. She read about Hannah, who was mocked for being barren but eventually blessed with a son. She read about Ruth, who lost everything but found restoration in a foreign land. She read about the woman at the well, who'd been discarded by 5 men but encountered Jesus anyway. Maybe, Amber whispered into the darkness, maybe my story isn't over yet. She kept Frank's photo in her nightstand drawer, not because she still loved him, but because she needed to remember this pain. She needed it to fuel her forward, to remind her that rock bottom is just a foundation for rebuilding. One evening, 3 months after the divorce, Amber's supervisor at Tasteful Events approached her with an unusual request. We've got a private event at Hartsfield, one of those fancy airport lounges. The client specifically requested Southern-style appetizers. You grew up in Georgia, right? Think you can handle it? Amber nodded, her heart suddenly beating faster. Yes, ma'am, I can handle it. She had no idea that this catering gig, this simple delivery of peach cobbler bites and shrimp and grits to a private airport lounge, would become the door to everything. Sometimes God's miracles arrive disguised. The private lounge at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport was a different world. Amber had spent her entire life in modest spaces, small-town diners, cramped apartments, church basements with folding tables. But stepping into the executive sky lounge felt like walking onto a movie set. Leather chairs that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking runways where private jets sat like sleeping giants. Businessmen in $1,000 suits sipping bourbon at 11 in the morning. She felt completely out of place in her black catering uniform and non-slip shoes. Just set up the food on that table, her supervisor instructed, already checking her phone. Make it look nice. These people pay stupid money for presentation. Amber arranged the trays with careful precision, mini shrimp and grits in crystal cups, peach cobbler bites dusted with powdered sugar, bourbon-glazed chicken skewers that smelled like heaven. Her hands moved with practiced grace, each plate positioned perfectly, each garnish placed with intention. She was so focused that she didn't notice the man choking until someone screamed. "Oh my God, Mr. Hughes, someone help him!" Amber's head snapped up. Across the lounge, a silver-haired black man in an expensive suit was clutching his throat, his face turning an alarming shade of red. People were standing, panicking, shouting for help, but no one was actually helping. Something inside Amber took over. Maybe muscle memory from a CPR class she'd taken at church years ago, maybe divine instinct. She dropped the tray she was holding and ran. "Move!" she pushed through the crowd. "Does anyone have an EpiPen? He's having an allergic reaction." A flight attendant fumbled through a first aid kit while Amber loosened the man's tie and helped him into a position where he could breathe. "Stay with me, sir. Help is coming. Just stay with me." His eyes were wide with fear, his breathing labored and wheezing. "Here!" The attendant handed her an EpiPen. Amber's hands were steady as she administered it into his thigh, her voice calm despite her racing heart. "You're gonna be okay. Just breathe. That's it. Slow breaths." Within seconds, his color began returning. His breathing eased. The panic in his eyes faded into relief. Paramedics arrived minutes later, but the crisis had passed. As they checked his vitals, the man, Mr. Hughes, grabbed Amber's hand. "You saved my life," he rasped, his voice still rough. "What's your name?" "Amber. Amber Robinson, sir." "Well, Amber Robinson, I owe you more than a thank you." He squeezed her hand with surprising strength. "Don't disappear on me. I mean it." 3 days later, Amber received a call from an unknown number. "Ms. Robinson, this is Edward Hughes. We met at the airport lounge. I hope you don't mind. I got your number from the catering company. I wanted to properly thank you for what you did." Amber's stomach fluttered with anxiety. Rich people made her nervous now, ever since Frank had started running in those circles and decided she didn't belong. "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Hughes. I just did what anyone would do." His warm laugh came through the phone. "Most people froze, young lady. You acted. That's character. Listen, I own a private aviation company. Charter flights for executives, celebrities, that sort of thing. We're always looking for quality catering services for our clients. Would you be interested in contracting with us?" Amber's breath caught. I just do prep work, sir. I'm not. You made the best shrimp and grits I've had outside my mama's kitchen. And you kept your head in a crisis. That's exactly who I want feeding my clients. Think about it. No pressure. But if you're interested, we could start with a trial contract. See how it goes. After hanging up, Amber sat on Janelle's couch, staring at her phone in disbelief. "Nell," she called out. "You're not going to believe this." The trial contract turned into a regular gig. Every week, Amber catered flights, business executives heading to New York, musicians flying to LA, politicians traveling to DC. The pay was triple what she'd been making. For the first time since the divorce, she could breathe without counting every dollar. But more than money, something else was growing inside her: confidence. She started paying attention to how the aviation business worked. She listened when pilots talked about routes and fuel costs. She asked questions about aircraft maintenance and booking systems. She watched Mr. Hughes manage his operation with keen interest, her mind absorbing information like a sponge. One evening, as she cleaned up after a particularly successful event, Mr. Hughes approached her. "You're curious about this business, aren't you? I see you watching, listening, learning." Amber smiled sheepishly. "Is it that obvious?" "Curiosity is a gift, not a flaw." He handed her a business card for a community college aviation management program. "I think you've got something special, Amber. Don't limit yourself to just catering. There's a whole industry here, and it needs smart, hard-working people like you." That night, Amber enrolled in her first class. She was 29 years old, divorced, living on a pull-out couch, working 60-hour weeks. But for the first time in a long time, she felt something dangerous and beautiful. Hope. Amber had been catering flights for Hughes Aviation for 8 months when she first met Ethan Blake. It was a rainy Tuesday morning, and she was rushing through the private terminal with trays of breakfast pastries and fresh brewed coffee for a charter to Miami. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her catering apron slightly damp from the drizzle outside. She was reviewing her checklist, making sure she hadn't forgotten anything, when she collided headfirst into someone coming around the corner. Coffee exploded everywhere. "Oh no! Oh my God! I'm so sorry!" Amber gasped, watching in horror as brown liquid spread across a pristine white pilot's shirt and soaked into an open flight logbook. The man looked down at himself, then at the ruined logbook, then at Amber's mortified face. For a terrible moment she thought he might yell. Then his lips twitched. "Well," he said, his voice deep and surprisingly amused, "that's one way to get introduced. I'm Ethan Blake. And you must be the caterer everyone's been raving about." Amber wanted to disappear into the floor. "I'm Amber Robinson, and I'm usually less destructive." Ethan laughed, a genuine, warm sound that somehow made the disaster feel less catastrophic. "Don't worry about it. This shirt was due for a coffee baptism anyway." He examined the logbook with a wince. "Though I'll probably need to rewrite today's flight plan. Please, let me replace your shirt and the logbook. I can..." "Amber." He met her eyes, and she noticed they were a kind, steady brown. "Breathe. It's just coffee. The plane's not going to fall out of the sky because my paperwork got a little wet." Something about his calm demeanor made her shoulders relax. "You're being way too nice about this. My mama taught me that accidents aren't character flaws." He smiled. "Besides, any excuse to delay paperwork is a blessing in disguise." Over the following months, their paths crossed frequently. Ethan was one of Hughes Aviation's senior pilots, flying routes up and down the East Coast. He was a widower in his mid-30s, his wife having passed from breast cancer 3 years earlier. He carried his grief quietly, The way some men carry old war wounds, present but not paralyzing. Their friendship developed slowly, naturally, like a garden that grows without forcing. He'd linger in the lounge while she set up catering, asking about her day. She'd bring him fresh coffee before early morning flights, remembering he took it black with 1 sugar. They talked about everything. Her business classes, his daughter who'd passed away with her mother, Amber's painful divorce, his struggle with loneliness. "You ever feel like you're rebuilding yourself from scratch?" Amber asked him one evening as they watched the sunset through the terminal windows. Most of the staff had gone home, leaving them in comfortable silence. Ethan nodded slowly. "Every single day. After Sarah died, I didn't know who I was anymore. I was a husband, then suddenly I wasn't. It's like someone erased half of your identity and said, figure out the rest on your own." "That's exactly it." Amber's voice was soft with recognition. "Frank made me feel like I was only valuable because of him. When he left, I thought I'd disappeared too. But you didn't." Ethan turned to look at her, his gaze steady and sure. "You're right here, building something, learning, growing. That takes more courage than most people have." Something shifted in that moment, something neither of them was quite ready to name yet. 6 months later, Ethan asked her to dinner. Not as colleagues, not as friends, but as something more. They went to a small Italian restaurant in Midtown. Nothing fancy, just red-checkered tablecloths and homemade pasta. Amber wore a simple blue dress she'd bought from Target, suddenly nervous in a way she hadn't been in years. "I'm not good at this," Ethan admitted over breadsticks, his usual confidence replaced with endearing awkwardness. "The dating thing, I haven't done it since before Sarah." "I'm terrible at it," Amber confessed. "My last relationship ended with me getting called not enough and handed divorce papers." "Then we'll figure it out together." He reached across the table, his hand open, waiting. No pressure, no timeline, just honesty. "Can we do that?" Amber placed her hand in his, feeling something she thought she'd lost forever. "Trust." "Yeah," she whispered. "We can do that." Their relationship unfolded like a sunrise, gentle, gradual, and full of warmth. Ethan never rushed her. He never made her feel like she needed to be more than she was. He loved her laughter, her ambition, her quiet strength. He loved the way she prayed before meals and hummed gospel songs while cooking. And slowly, carefully, Amber let herself love him back. 1 year after their first date, Ethan proposed in the same airport lounge where they'd first met, coffee stain and all. They married in a small church ceremony with Janelle as maid of honor and Mr. Hughes walking Amber down the aisle. For the first time since Frank, Amber believed in new beginnings. 2 years later, sitting in a doctor's office holding Ethan's hand, she heard words that made her heart stop. "Congratulations, Mrs. Blake, you're pregnant, with triplets." Amber burst into tears, great heaving sobs of joy and vindication. The woman Frank called barren was carrying 3 miracles. Meanwhile, 300 miles south in Greenville, Frank Larry was living the life he'd always dreamed of, at least on paper. Larry Express Transport had expanded to 5 southern states. He owned a gleaming office building in downtown Atlanta, a penthouse in Buckhead, and a vacation home on Tybee Island. His Instagram showed a highlight reel of success: luxury cars, designer suits, VIP sections at clubs, handshakes with local politicians. But the comments his mother left under every photo told a different story. "All this money and still no grandchildren for me? When are you going to settle down?" Frank's mother, Gloria Larry, was a formidable woman who measured success in bloodline continuation. She'd tolerated Amber back when they were poor, but she'd been the first to celebrate the divorce. "That girl was holding you back," she'd told Frank. "You need a woman who matches your level. Someone from a good family. Someone with class." Now she called him 3 times a week with the same question: "When am I getting my grandbabies?" The truth was, Frank was lonely. Success had brought money, respect, and opportunity, but it hadn't brought peace. His penthouse was immaculate and empty. His bed was king-sized and cold. The women he dated were beautiful and temporary, interested in his wallet more than his soul. Late at night, in moments he'd never admit to anyone, Frank thought about Amber. He remembered how she used to pray over their meals, how she'd rub his shoulders after long days, how she'd believed in him when he was nobody. But pride is a powerful drug, and Frank was still high on it. Everything changed when he met Vanessa Reed at a charity gala in Buckhead. Vanessa was everything Frank thought he wanted. She was stunning, tall and graceful with flawless makeup and a smile that belonged in magazines. She came from the Reed family, old Atlanta money with connections that opened doors Frank had been knocking on for years. Her father owned commercial real estate across the Southeast. Her mother sat on the boards of 3 major nonprofits. When Vanessa laughed at Frank's jokes and touched his arm with perfectly manicured nails, he felt something he'd been chasing since the divorce: validation. "You're not like the other men here," Vanessa purred over champagne. "You built yourself from nothing. That's attractive." Within 3 months, they were inseparable. Vanessa knew how to play the game. She posted couple photos with carefully crafted captions, attended his business events wearing designer gowns, and made sure everyone knew she was dating the Frank Larry. She never asked about his past. Never wanted to hear about the struggle years or the woman who'd helped him through them. Vanessa only cared about the man he'd become, not the journey that made him. Frank proposed on a yacht in Miami, photographers conveniently nearby to capture the moment. The ring cost more than his first delivery truck. Vanessa's squeal of delight echoed across the water. "Oh my God, baby! Yes! 1,000 times yes!" The engagement announcement went viral in Atlanta social circles. Frank's phone exploded with congratulations. His mother finally stopped nagging. For the first time in years, Frank felt like he'd won. But winning requires someone to lose. One evening, while Vanessa scrolled through Pinterest planning their dream wedding, Frank sat in his home office reviewing contracts. His mind wandered, and before he knew it, he'd typed Amber's name into Facebook. Her profile was private, the picture too small to see clearly. No posts visible. No life updates. It was like she'd vanished. Good, Frank thought, though something uncomfortable twisted in his chest. She's probably still struggling, probably still bitter about the divorce. An idea began forming, dark, petty, and fueled by the same pride that had ended his marriage. "Babe," he called out to Vanessa, "what if we did something really spectacular for the wedding? Something nobody's ever done before?" Vanessa appeared in the doorway, eyes bright with interest. "Like what?" "What if we had the ceremony at a private airfield? Red carpet, luxury cars, maybe even a jet as a backdrop. Make it look like we're about to fly off into the sunset?" Vanessa squealed. "Oh my God, Frank, that's genius. It'll be so Instagram perfect." Frank smiled, but his mind was elsewhere. He pulled up his contacts and found his wedding planner's number. "I need you to do something for me," he said when she answered. "I'm sending you an address. I want a special invitation sent there, first-class paper, hand-delivered. Make it look expensive." "Of course, Mr. Larry. Who's the recipient?" Frank paused, his finger hovering over Amber's old address in Greenville. He didn't know she'd moved, didn't know anything about her life now. "Amber Robinson," he said finally. "My ex-wife. I want her to see what she missed out on." The wedding planner hesitated. "Sir, are you sure that's—" "Just do it. Charge me extra if you need to track her down. I want her at my wedding." He hung up, feeling a rush of vindictive satisfaction. In his mind, Amber would show up broken and poor, watch him marry a woman far superior, and finally understand the mistake she'd made by not being enough. Frank had no idea he was about to orchestrate his own humiliation. Pride always writes checks that reality has to cash. The invitation arrived on a Thursday afternoon, delivered by courier to Amber's new home, a modest but beautiful 3-bedroom house in a quiet Atlanta suburb that she and Ethan had purchased together. Amber was 7 months pregnant, her belly round and prominent, moving slowly as she signed for the thick, cream-colored envelope. The boys, as she'd taken to calling her unborn triplets, had been particularly active that morning, tumbling and kicking like they were training for the Olympics. She settled into the rocking chair on the front porch, curious about the formal delivery. The envelope was heavy, expensive, the kind of paper stock that announced importance before you even opened it. Her hands trembled slightly as she broke the gold wax seal. Mr. Frank Isaiah Larry and Ms. Vanessa Christine Reed request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration. The words blurred as Amber's vision tunneled. Frank, getting married, and he'd invited her. She read further, her heart pounding. Join us for an exclusive ceremony at Hartsfield Executive Airfield, where love takes flight, black tie required. Saturday, June 15th, 4:00 p.m. There was a handwritten note at the bottom in Frank's distinctive scrawl. Amber, I thought you'd want to see how things turned out. No hard feelings. F. The audacity of it knocked the breath from her lungs. Janelle found her 20 minutes later, still sitting on the porch, the invitation clutched in her hands, tears streaming down her face. Amber, baby, what's wrong? Is it the babies? Janelle rushed over, panic in her voice. Amber held up the invitation wordlessly. Janelle snatched it, read it quickly, and her face transformed from concern to fury. Oh, hell no, hell no! This man has lost his entire mind. Who invites their ex-wife to their wedding? And with a note like that? He wants to humiliate me, Amber whispered, her voice hollow. He thinks I'm still that broken woman he threw away. He wants me to come and see him with someone better, someone worthy of him. Then you don't go. Simple as that. You delete this from your memory and keep living your blessed life. But Amber sat in silence, her mind churning. Part of her wanted to do exactly what Janelle suggested, throw the invitation away and forget Frank Larry existed. But another part of her, the part that had survived divorce and poverty and rebuilding from nothing, felt something else stirring. Not revenge, something quieter, but more powerful. Closure. When Ethan came home that evening from a charter flight to Nashville, he found Amber in their bedroom, the invitation spread on the dresser, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Hey, beautiful, he greeted her, immediately sensing the tension. What's going on? She handed him the invitation without a word. Ethan read it slowly, his jaw tightening with each line. When he finished, he set it down carefully, like it might explode. This is the ex-husband? His voice was controlled, but Amber could hear the anger underneath. The one who called you not enough? She nodded. And he invited you to watch him marry someone else? At an airfield? Ethan's laugh was bitter. Man's really trying to flex with jets and red carpets, huh? He doesn't know, Ethan. Amber's voice was soft but steady. He doesn't know about you, about the babies, about the business. He still thinks I'm that poor woman he divorced. He invited me because he wants to see me broken. Ethan knelt in front of her chair, taking both her hands in his. Baby, you don't owe him anything. Not your presence, not your time, not even your thoughts. We can throw this away right now. I know. Amber met his eyes. But what if I want to go? Ethan's eyebrows shot up. You want to go? To his wedding? Not for him. For me. She squeezed his hands. I spent so long believing what Frank said about me, that I wasn't enough, that I was too plain, too simple, too poor. Even after everything we've built, sometimes late at night, I still hear his voice telling me I'm nothing. Her voice cracked. What if going there, not broken, but whole? What if that finally silences that voice? What if showing up as the woman God remade me into is how I close that chapter for good? Ethan was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Then slowly, a smile spread across his lips. If you go, he said carefully, you're not going alone, and you're definitely not going looking anything less than the queen you are. Amber's eyes widened. You'd come with me? Baby, I'd fly the plane myself if we had one available. He grinned. Actually, give me a few days. I might have an idea. That Sunday after church, Amber stood in front of her bathroom mirror, one hand on her swollen belly, the other holding Frank's invitation. You three, she whispered to her unborn sons, are going to be part of the greatest testimony. Your daddy Frank said I was barren. He said I'd never amount to anything. But look at us now. She thought about the scared woman who'd left Greenville with 2 suitcases and a broken heart. Then she looked at the woman in the mirror, successful, loved, pregnant with triplets, and co-owner of a thriving aviation catering business that Mr. Hughes had recently made her partner in. Amber smiled, a fierce, beautiful smile that held no bitterness, only triumph. We're going to that wedding, she told her reflection. And we're going to show Frank Larry what God does with the people he throws away. She placed the invitation in her dresser drawer and went to find Ethan. It was time to plan an entrance that would stop the world from breathing. Saturday, June 15th arrived with perfect Georgia sunshine and cloudless blue skies. At Hartsfield Executive Airfield, Frank Larry's wedding was already the event of the season. A crimson-red carpet stretched across the tarmac, flanked by towering arrangements of white roses and orchids. White chairs with gold accents sat in neat rows, filled with Atlanta's elite. Business owners, local celebrities, socialites in designer gowns and expensive jewelry. Behind the altar stood Frank's crowning touch, a sleek black and silver private jet, its stairs extended, its body gleaming in the afternoon sun like a monument to his success. Photographers positioned themselves strategically, cameras ready to capture every moment of what Frank had billed as the wedding of the year. Frank stood near the altar in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, his groomsmen flanking him in matching black. He checked his Rolex for the 3rd time, scanning the arriving guests with satisfaction. Luxury cars lined the entrance, Mercedes, BMWs, a few Bentleys. Exactly the kind of crowd he wanted. "Looking good, man," his best friend Marcus said, adjusting Frank's bow tie. "You really went all out." "Had to," Frank replied, his chest puffed with pride. "When you marry a Reed, you don't do courthouse weddings. You make a statement." His eyes drifted to the front row, where he'd reserved a seat with a small placard, reserved for special guest. He'd placed it there specifically for Amber, imagining her sitting alone, watching him marry Vanessa, finally understanding her mistake. She probably wouldn't even show up, he thought, probably too ashamed, but a small, cruel part of him hoped she would. Inside the bridal suite, Vanessa Reed was a vision in white. Her Vera Wang gown cost more than a car. Her makeup was airbrushed to perfection, and her 3 bridesmaids fussed around her like ladies-in-waiting attending a queen. "You're absolutely stunning," her maid of honor gushed. "Frank is going to die when he sees you." Vanessa smiled at her reflection, adjusting her diamond earrings, a wedding gift from her father. Everything was perfect. The dress, the venue, the guest list. She was marrying a self-made millionaire who worshipped her, and in an hour, her Instagram would break the internet. "Is everyone seated?" she asked her wedding coordinator. "Almost. We're just waiting on a few stragglers. We'll start in 10 minutes. Vanessa nodded, taking a final look in the mirror. Let's give them a show they'll never forget. At precisely 3:55 p.m., just as the string quartet began the prelude music, a sound cut through the air that didn't belong. The deep, throaty roar of jet engines. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Frank looked up, confusion flickering across his face. A private jet was descending toward the airfield, not the decorative one behind the altar, but a real aircraft, sleek and black, approaching the adjacent runway with practiced precision. "That's not supposed to be here," Frank muttered to Marcus. "I paid for exclusive use of this airfield." The jet touched down smoothly, taxiing toward the ceremony area with an authority that commanded attention. Guests stood, murmuring in confusion and curiosity. Photographers turned their cameras toward the unexpected arrival. The engines powered down. The stairs extended, and then the door opened. Amber Robinson. Blake stepped into the doorway, and time seemed to stop. She wore an emerald green gown that hugged her 7-month pregnant belly like royalty, the silk catching the sunlight and shimmering with every movement. Her hair was styled in elegant curls that cascaded over her shoulders. Diamond earrings, a gift from Ethan, sparkled at her ears. Her makeup was flawless. highlighting the natural beauty Frank had once called too plain. But it wasn't just Amber who emerged. Holding her left hand was Ethan Blake in a sharp black tuxedo, his presence calm and commanding. And holding her right hand were 3-year-old twin boys from Ethan's family whom they'd dressed for the occasion, a rehearsal for the triplets she was carrying, dressed in miniature tuxedos, their faces bright with innocent curiosity. The effect was devastating. Amber descended the stairs slowly, gracefully, each step deliberate. The red carpet that Frank had laid for his own glorification became her runway. The guests' gasps created a symphony of shock. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "Is that his ex-wife? She came in a private jet? And she's pregnant? With multiple kids? Wait, didn't he say she couldn't have children?" Frank's face drained of all color. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His eyes were locked on Amber, disbelief and horror warring on his features. Marcus grabbed his arm. "Bro, isn't that—" "Amber," Frank breathed, the name barely audible. Inside the bridal suite, Vanessa's coordinator burst through the door, her face pale. "Ms. Reed, we have a situation." "What kind of situation?" Vanessa asked, irritation creeping into her voice. "There's another jet, and a woman just arrived. A pregnant woman, in an emerald gown, with children, and everyone's staring." Vanessa's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide her confusion. "What woman? What are you talking about?" I think it's his ex-wife." The color drained from Vanessa's face. "His what?" Back on the red carpet, Amber walked toward the ceremony area with her head held high, her hand resting gently on her pregnant belly. Ethan walked beside her, protective and proud. The boys held her hands tightly, their little patent leather shoes clicking on the pavement. Every camera turned. Every phone came out. The string quartet faltered and stopped playing. Amber's eyes found Frank's across the crowd. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply looked at him with the quiet dignity of someone who'd survived his worst and emerged victorious. Then she spotted her reserved seat, special guest. And the irony of it made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. She walked directly to that front row seat and sat down gracefully, the boys settling beside her, Ethan taking the seat to her left. The silence was deafening, and somewhere in that frozen moment, Frank Larry realized he'd made a catastrophic mistake. He'd invited his past to witness his future, never imagining his past would show up looking like destiny. The airfield was a cathedral of silence, every eye fixed on Amber Robinson Blake as she sat in the front row, her emerald gown a beacon of triumph. The triplets, tiny in their tuxedos, fidgeted beside her, whispering, "Mommy, everyone's looking." Amber leaned down, her voice steady as a hymn. "Then let them see what grace looks like." Ethan squeezed her hand, his presence a quiet fortress. Across the tarmac, Frank Larry stood frozen, his custom tuxedo no match for the weight of his unraveling pride. The string quartet's bows hung limp, the prelude abandoned. Guests shifted in their gold-accented chairs, phones raised, capturing the moment that was already rewriting Atlanta's gossip pages. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind over water. "That's his ex-wife? She came in a jet? Didn't he call her barren?" Frank's face was a mask of ash, his eyes locked on Amber, not the broken woman he'd summoned to gloat over, but a queen who'd turned his trap into her throne. Vanessa Reed's laughter from the bridal suite had long since died. She emerged now, her Vera Wang gown trailing like a ghost, her perfect makeup unable to hide the storm brewing in her eyes. She marched toward Frank, her heels clicking like gunfire on the red carpet. "You told me she was barren," she hissed, her voice low but sharp enough to slice through the murmurs. "You said she was nothing, a nobody who'd never move on. Who is that woman?" Frank opened his mouth, but words betrayed him. His jaw worked soundlessly, his Rolex glinting uselessly in the sun. "Vanessa, he stammered, but she cut him off, her bouquet trembling in her grip. "Don't." Her eyes flicked to Amber, then back to him, disgust curling her lips. "You invited her here to shame her, didn't you? And now look at you, standing there like a fool." She dropped the bouquet, petals scattering like broken promises. "This wedding is over." With a final glare, she turned, her bridesmaids scrambling after her, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. The crowd erupted into murmurs, phones recording the chaos. Frank's best man, Marcus, grabbed his arm. "Man, say something. This is your wedding." But Frank couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His eyes were still on Amber, who rose from her seat with the grace of a woman who'd rebuilt herself from ruins. She stepped forward, the triplets clutching her hands, Ethan a step behind. The red carpet stretched between her and Frank like a river of reckoning. "Frank," she said, her voice clear and calm, carrying over the crowd, "you once told me I'd never rise, that I was too plain, too poor, too broken to be anything more than your past." She paused, her gaze unwavering, no trace of malice in her eyes, only truth. "Yet here I am, with everything you said I lacked, a husband who loves me, sons who are my miracles, a life built on faith, not pride." The guests leaned in, some nodding, others whispering her words back to each other. A photographer's flash popped, freezing the moment. Amber's hand rested on her swollen belly, the triplets tugging at her gown, oblivious to the weight of her words. "I didn't come here to gloat," she continued. "I came to close a door you tried to keep open. I forgive you, Frank. Not for you, but for me. Because I'm free." Frank's knees buckled slightly, his hand gripping Marcus for support. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a chorus of shock and admiration. She forgave him? After what he did? A woman in the back row wiped tears from her eyes. Another guest posted a video with the caption, "This is what strength looks like." Vanessa's absence left a void, but Amber's presence filled it. Frank's vision of humiliating her had collapsed into his own public unraveling. He looked at the reserved seat, special guest, and saw his mistake written in gold ink. He'd invited his past to witness his future, never imagining it would arrive as destiny. As Amber turned to leave, Ethan lifted one of the boys onto his shoulders, the other holding her hand. The jet waited behind them, its engines humming softly, ready to carry them back to a life Frank could never touch. The crowd parted, some clapping softly, others still filming. Amber didn't look back. Frank stood alone on the altar, his empire of pride crumbling under the weight of a single emerald gown. The Atlanta skyline shimmered beyond Frank Larry's penthouse windows, a glittering facade that mocked the emptiness within. 3 days had passed since his wedding collapsed under the weight of Amber's radiant arrival, and the world hadn't stopped dissecting it. Social media was ablaze. Frank Larry's ex-wife arrives in private jet with triplets, wedding canceled. Hashtags like hashtag Amber Rising and hashtag Frank Flopped trended relentlessly. Videos of Amber's poised speech in her emerald gown racking up millions of views. Comments tore into Frank's pride. He tried to shame her, but she stole the show. That's what happens when you underestimate a black queen. His phone buzzed with notifications. Investors withdrawing, clients canceling, his mother, Gloria, leaving voicemails. "You invited Amber? Have you lost your mind?" Vanessa's single message burned deepest. "You humiliated me, Frank. We're done." Frank hadn't slept. His Buckhead penthouse, once a symbol of triumph, felt like a mausoleum, its sleek furniture cold, its silence deafening. Larry Express Transport was bleeding contracts, his reputation unraveling with every retweet. Alone, he scrolled through a video of Amber's exit from the airfield. She walked back to the jet, Ethan hoisting one boy onto his shoulders, the other clinging to her hand, her pregnant belly a silent rebuke to Frank's lies about her barrenness. His chest ached, a regret so sharp it stole his breath. He typed her name into a search bar, desperate for a glimpse of her life. Her profiles were private, but a business listing caught his eye. Blake Aviation Catering, co-owned by Amber Robinson. Blake. His jaw dropped. She wasn't just surviving, she was soaring. The next morning, a restless pull drove him to her office near Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. His tailored suit felt like a lie. His confidence eroded. The office hummed with purpose. Staff prepped trays of bourbon-glazed skewers, phones rang with orders, and the scent of peach cobbler hung in the air like a memory of Greenville. Amber stood at a desk, reviewing a clipboard, her navy dress accentuating her 7-month pregnant belly. Her hair was pulled back, her face calm but focused. When their eyes met, time folded back to their shared dreams over Waffle House coffee, before pride poisoned everything. "Frank," she said, her voice steady, neither warm nor cold. "What are you doing here?" He swallowed, throat tight. "I needed to see you. To talk." Curious glances from staff followed them as Amber led him to a small meeting room, closing the door. The silence was a weight pressing on Frank's chest. He shifted, hands restless. "I messed up, Amber," he began, voice raw. "Not just at the wedding. Years ago. You were my miracle, my foundation. I threw you away for nothing." His eyes dropped, unable to hold hers. "I thought success meant money, status, a woman like Vanessa, but it's empty. Seeing you there, with your husband, your kids, your life, I saw what I lost." Amber listened, her face unreadable. She remembered the nights on Janelle's couch, sobbing into her Bible, stitching her heart back together with Hannah's prayers and Ruth's resilience. She thought of Ethan's unwavering love, the triplets kicking inside her, the business she'd built from ashes. "Frank," she said softly, "I forgave you long before you walked in here. Not for you, but for me. I had to be free. You don't owe me sorrow. You owe yourself truth. You built an empire on pride, and now it's falling. That's not my burden to carry." Her words cut deeper than anger, each one a mirror to his failures. Frank's voice broke. "I went to a doctor last week, after the wedding, wanted to know why Vanessa and why we couldn't—" He paused, shame choking him. "They said it's me. Low fertility. All those years I called you barren. I blamed you for what I couldn't give, and now you're carrying triplets." His hands trembled, tears brimming but unshed. "I was wrong about everything." Amber's eyes softened, not with pity, but with mercy, the kind forged in pain and prayer. "God doesn't make mistakes, Frank. My sons, my life, they're proof of that. I hope you find peace, but it won't come from me. It'll come when you face the man in the mirror." She rested a hand on her belly, feeling a kick, a reminder of the future waiting. Frank nodded, his shoulders slumped, no longer the man who'd dreamed of empires. "I'm sorry, Amber, truly. You're more than I ever deserved." He turned to leave, pausing at the door. "Thank you for being you." As he walked out, Amber exhaled, the weight of the past lifting. The triplets kicked again, and she smiled. "We're more than okay, little ones," she whispered. Outside, Frank sat in his car, staring at the sky where jets traced paths he'd never follow. For the first time in years, he closed his eyes and prayed, a broken man seeking something he couldn't name. The Atlanta sunset painted the sky in hues of gold and amber, a fitting farewell as Amber Robinson Blake stood on the tarmac at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. Her emerald gown was gone, replaced by a simple white dress that flowed over her 8-month pregnant belly. But the regal grace she'd carried at Frank's wedding lingered. Her triplets, still growing within her, kicked softly, as if eager for the journey ahead. Beside her, Ethan Blake held her hand, his steady brown eyes reflecting pride and love. The twin boys from his family, now honorary big brothers, bounced excitedly in their sneakers, clutching tiny backpacks. A private jet waited behind them, its sleek black body gleaming under the fading light, a symbol of the altitude Amber had reached from ashes. Inside the Blake Aviation catering office, the day had been a whirlwind. Orders poured in after the viral wedding moment, clients clamoring for the queen who stole the show. Amber and Ethan had spent the morning signing a new contract with a major airline, a deal that would expand their business across the Southeast. Mr. Hughes, now a mentor and partner, had clapped Amber on the shoulder, his eyes twinkling. "You're not just feeding people, Amber. You're feeding their souls." Her heart swelled, not with pride, but with gratitude for a God who turned pain into purpose. As they prepared to board the jet for a rare weekend getaway, a gift from Mr. Hughes to celebrate their success, Amber paused, pulling a folded letter from her purse. It had arrived that morning, hand-delivered to their modest Atlanta home. The handwriting was unmistakable, Frank's. She'd read it alone in their kitchen, tears pooling as his words spilled across the page. "Amber, I'll never undo the hurt I caused. Your forgiveness showed me what grace looks like. Thank you for being the woman I couldn't see. I'm trying to be better. Frank." She'd tucked the letter away, not out of anger, but because her story no longer needed his ink. "Ready, love?" Ethan's voice pulled her back. He adjusted one boy's backpack, his smile softening the lines grief had once carved into his face. Amber nodded, her hand resting on her belly. "Ready," she said, her voice a quiet vow. The boys ran ahead, their laughter echoing across the tarmac. "We're flying, Mommy," one shouted, pressing his face to the jet's window as they climbed the stairs. Amber followed, her steps deliberate, each one a testament to the woman who'd left Greenville with 2 suitcases and a broken heart. Inside the jet, the cabin was warm, the leather seats smelling of new beginnings. Amber settled by a window, Ethan beside her, the boys chattering about clouds and stars. As the engines hummed to life, she thought of the journey that had brought her here. The nights on Janelle's couch, clutching her Bible, whispering prayers through tears. The catering gigs that calloused her hands but strengthened her spirit. The moment she saved Mr. Hughes, not knowing it would open doors to a future she'd never dreamed. Ethan's coffee-stained flight log, their first laugh, the slow bloom of love that taught her trust again. And the triplets, 3 miracles that silenced Frank's lies and filled her with joy. The jet taxied, then lifted, the ground falling away as the sky opened wide. The boys pressed their faces to the windows, gasping as Atlanta shrank below, its lights twinkling like scattered jewels. Amber's eyes traced the horizon, her heart full. She thought of Frank, alone in his penthouse, his empire crumbling under the weight of truth. She didn't hate him, hadn't for years. His invitation, meant to shame her, had instead become her stage, a moment to show the world what God does with the discarded. "Some invitations aren't meant to shame you," she whispered, her words lost in the hum of the engines. "They're meant to show the world how far grace can fly," Ethan overheard, squeezing her hand. "You showed them, baby," he said, his voice thick with pride. "You showed them all." The jet climbed higher, piercing clouds that glowed gold in the sunset. Amber closed her eyes, feeling the triplets move, their tiny kicks a rhythm of promise. She saw her grandmother's Bible, its worn pages holding Hannah's prayers, Ruth's redemption, the woman at the well's encounter with grace. She saw herself, not the broken girl Frank had discarded, but the woman God had remade, crowned with dignity, surrounded by love. As the sky turned to twilight, Amber smiled, her reflection faint in the window. The boys giggled, Ethan hummed a gospel tune, and the jet soared into the future. Below, the world whispered her story, a woman who rose, not with revenge but with grace, her life a testament to divine vindication. The past was a runway, now behind her, and the sky ahead was limitless. Thanks for watching this story till the end. If you enjoyed it, you'll definitely love the next one. It's even more captivating and full of twists you won't see coming. Click the image on your screen to watch it now, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Drop a comment below, and also rate this story from 1 to 10. I'd love to hear what you think.